So welcome. We have another full episode for you. Hopefully, in our last full episode, Kate asked a obscure question to a member of the White House press corps, which I still can't believe she did. But that's Kate for you. But
have I ever not shocked you?
No, you haven't. But this might be a new high or low, depending on your perspective. But looking over here on my left side here, our guest shouldn't need any introduction. You've seen him on TV before, but if you've ever watched SportsCenter, if you've ever watched Wipeout, you've seen our guest today. Please welcome John Anderson.
Thank you for having me. I want to know what you asked the White House press corps. Major Garrett, I consider a pretty decent friend of mine, and so I don't know if it was him, but I'd love to find. I'd love to know what you bombarded them with.
I asked what their spirit dinosaur is.
And did you get a good answer? I'm not sure I have that variety of dinosaurs. Paleontology is not really my thing. I don't know what I have. Did you get a good answer?
Yeah, he said Velociraptor, which totally is right up there and a great.
Right.
To be somebody sitting in the White House asking questions of a press secretary, even the president of the United States, you kind of have to be a Velociraptor to get to that point.
Yeah. See, I would say Steve Levy, but I don't even know if that's an actual type. I just know he's really old.
Oh man, we're off on firing on all cylinders today so far. Let's jump right in. Obviously, you've been with ESPN for 20 plus years. I just got an email from ESPN Plus telling me what I need to watch tonight, so I will have to check that out afterwards. But you majored in journalism. You went to Mizzou, obviously, as we can see behind you.
Yeah, I hide that, don't I?
What was the moment where you knew that journalism was what you wanted to do?
I tell you, that is, it's either when I was about 7 or the clarity after my senior year or just before I graduated when I was 18. I say 7 because I grew up watching local news and just thought I'm going to be Al Jerkins or Bill Jarts or Ken Lass or John Campbell or Daryl Burnett, all the local sportscasters that were on my TV for those 3.5 minutes at 6 and 10. And, I watched, just couldn't get enough, right? And I would pray that they'd come out of breaks at different time, now that I know the technology. But, so that I could spin and if I could catch a little of all of them, I'd watch one guy for sure and then I'd flip over and see if I could catch somebody. Whoever got on first was the guy who got my attention. And I thought, boy, I would love someday to do that, right? That was my whole thing. I had a professor at Mizzou who worked in Green Bay, and it almost ruined my career before I started because he said, I used to work in Green Bay. He was a news reporter. And I said, really? For what station? WBAY. And I said, yeah, I don't remember ever seeing you because I didn't watch that. They tell you 70% of people in local news turn off their TV after weather. Well, I'm one of the 30% that turned it on after weather and watched sports. And so I kind of had that in my mind. That's sort of really what I wanted to do. And I knew if I went to journalism school, I would have to go to the University of Missouri. I was going to go away from home and because of the reputation. And I went for a visit down there, and 2 of the anchors that were at the student-run KOMU NBC station down there had been in Green Bay. So that was sort of on the burner. That was there. I was going to go to the University of Wisconsin because I grew up a Badger. For anything else, I don't care what it was. If I was going to be a dairy farmer or get into actuary science, didn't matter. That's where I was going to go. And I called the track coach at Wisconsin because I ran only really 1 year and for about 2 weeks in my junior year. And lo and behold, I went out for track and I had this phenomenal season, like out of nowhere. Literally, you want to talk about a guy from out of nowhere. So I called the guy in Wisconsin. I said, hey, any chance I could walk on and maybe run at that place? And bless he was a wonderful man. And he said, John, I recruited a high jumper. We're really high in him. And I don't know that there's a place for you. And so, by the way, he made the right choice. The guy he recruiter was a fellow named John Bear, who I'd known from Tomo. John won indoor titles in the Big Ten. He won an outdoor title in the Big Ten. He jumped 7th. He was phenomenal. I called the coach at Missouri, a guy named Bob Teal, wonderful man. And it would turn out to be the most influential person in my life aside from my parents. And he said, John, come on down. We would love to have you. There, I surrendered on the spot. Now I'm a journalism major for sure, and at least I was in the right spot. As it turns out, DJ, if you had called Coach Teal and said, "Can I come running?" He said, "Come on down. We'd love to have you." I didn't know that till afterwards, but Kate, he would have said the same thing to you. He was just a wonderful, gentlemanly old man. And track's not like football, right? Football, you walk on, that's a hard deal. Track is like, here's a pair of shorts, here's some shoes, there's the golf course. If you're not any good, I'll run you off in 2 weeks and I don't have to worry about you. So I tell people, yeah, I was heavily recruited, but I also, I fell into the right spot. But yeah, come on down, we'd love to have you. So he got me. So it was either when I decided, yeah, out of high school, I'm going to go to Missouri. But I really grew up watching these guys and thinking, boy, that's what I would love to do. And somehow I managed to, a lot of guys, what you want to be at 8 isn't what you get to be at 55. And I'm really lucky that that's happened in my life.
So while you were in college, since you already talked about it a little bit about why you went to Mizzou, did you get any internships while you were there?
I did not, because one, I was far away from home, so I always wanted to get home. And the other part is I went back and I had to work in the summer. I had to do some, at least the first 2 years. Then I had to come back, long story, and ended up back taking a class in summer school one time. So I never did. And I dearly paid for that early on when I went out to KOMU, right? That's part of what makes Missouri special, at least, especially in the broadcast field, is that there are a lot of colleges that have the student station, right? But the J School is a license with the curators to a regular old KOMU NBC station. Just like in your neighborhood or anybody, it's a regular NBC station. I took a producing class and I missed back time and I went right into Johnny Carson's monologue and I got yelled at like a real live person. I did not get a good grade that day, right? So, it's the real deal. So when I first went out there, Kate, right, like these people that had internships and done that, I'm like, these people are the smartest people in the world. I have no shot, But as it turns out, if you're smart and pay attention, you can catch up. But I would put on the back end of that, I think they're really necessary. And to that end, after I signed my second contract at Missouri, I got together with Fred Brown. God rest his soul. Fred was a recruiter at ESPN. He recently passed away. By the way, and a wonderful Cubs fan. And so a tragic loss for everybody. Such a good man. But I went with Fred and Mark Shapiro, who was running ESPN at the time. And I said, I'd like to do something in Missouri. And we established a scholarship, an internship for a Missouri student to come out every year now. And we've done that for almost 20 years. A couple years our candidates were great, and they took 2. So over the last 17, 18 years, we've had 20 different kids come out. Bless her heart, Sonia this year couldn't come out. She had the internship, and then she wasn't able to make it because of the COVID, and they canceled it. And I offered to pay, I will pay whatever the 12-week position is, but ESPN was nice enough. They took care of that for us. So I think it's really important. I think, to get that, especially in this one, it's a really valuable, I shouldn't say that. I don't know about being a nurse or a architectural engineer. I'm sure anybody benefits from being around professionals, see how they act, make contact, see how it works, real live, real time, real speed. And so even though I never did one, like I said, I wish I had, and finding the importance of it, I've tried to kind of give that back. And we've had a really nice, successful run with Mizzou kids being able to come out here at ESPN and summering in Bristol. Because I tell them, boy, even when I leave here, whatever it is, if I retire, I'll try to keep a summer home in Bristol, because gosh, who wouldn't want to be in the middle of Connecticut during the summer?
I've not been up to Connecticut, but I hear good things about I've been to Massachusetts in the winter. I have to imagine it's probably comparable, but
yeah, it's one big Currier and Ives painting, man. You don't want to miss it.
It's winter is one of those things I don't miss anymore. As you probably are aware. Moving on, when you had a couple stops along the way after college before you made it to ESPN. You were in Columbia, Tulsa. You made it to Phoenix for a few years. What was your big takeaway from your stops along that kind of like what prepared you for ESPN, or what do you think best prepared you for ESPN?
I think probably there's just some collectiveness of the experience, right? Or the seasoning. I think there's a little difference between both of those things. You know, experience is just the straight number of reps you do, but I think there's seasoning to be had in knowing what's the right story, what's the right thing to pull out of a game, where did it really turn? It is really how do you know, when is the coach BSing? When is the coach telling you the truth? When is the coach telling you something because the greater message is to his team? And some of that is, you know, it's a little like driving. My daughter is trying to get her license now. You know, they tell you, great, you got your license. Now in 10 years, you'll have seen most everything you need to see. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. In about 10 years in the business, you'll have seen about everything you're going to need to see to kind of feel. And you just can't hurry that at all. You know, you can't cram it all into one day. You can't cram it into 1 month. You can't cram it into one job. And then I think I was really fortunate that I've been in a lot of jobs in here, right? If you look, I was in Tulsa for almost 8 years, and I had a lot of different jobs. I started there as a part-time news photographer. Edited during the week, was the photographer on the weekend, and sometimes helped produce the 10 o'clock show. Then the fellow who was was the main sports photographer left, a guy named Jerry Murphy, went to El Paso, another Mizzou guy. And I jumped in and I got that job. So now I'm shooting full time, but at least I'm wholly in the sports world. Then my sports director, he had a non-compete, but he went to another station and they had a third guy position open up. So I went and took that. So now I'm still shooting, but now I'm reporting at a regular on-air gig in terms of reporting. Then the weekend guy, in one of my favorite stories, he went to adopt children in Russia. And he was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. He was gone 2 months, came back, and a month or two later quit. So then I was the weekend guy. So I ended up having 4 really good jobs, but I got to keep the same apartment where most people, right, you could be in Wichita Falls, and then you could be in Amarillo, and then you could be in Corpus Christi, and then Tulsa. So I was really lucky in that regard. But all those things, I had a bunch of different positions. So I think you get to see a larger picture, were really, really helpful. I don't think you can replace and I don't mean this to be funny, I don't think you can replace the experience of, being at a rodeo one day and watching OU in a really big football game with Texas 2 days later. Tulsa's a great market for all those reasons. You had 4 major colleges. And when I am there, suddenly they fire Tom Landry and they put in Jimmy Johnson, who had coached at Oklahoma State. So now we're down at the Cowboys all the time. So it really was an unbelievable spot to go to. And then Phoenix was great because I learned that even when you think you're really good, the guy in the news director's office is the one who cares. And I tell everybody, I worked on a great staff. A guy named Vic Lombardi, who now does altitude stuff and won a billion Emmys over in Denver, which is where he's from. Best local news guy, local TV guy in sports I've ever seen. Worked with a guy named Paul Calvisi, who ended up on Fox Sports San Francisco for a long time when they did regionals, and now he's back. 2 producers, one that went to be a great longtime anchor in El Paso, another guy who was ended up as a producer in Monterey, a photographer who won numerous. So I was in this wonderful staff where I learned from these guys, and the news director wasn't going to renew a single one of us. First Vic left, and then Paul left, and my contract was going to be up. And as I tell people, right, in this business, if they tell you you're not going to be renewed, right, that's getting fired. I mean, you can say mutual parting. They had a parting of the ways. If you think you're going to come in one day and they tell you not to come in that day, that's pretty much being fired. Luckily, I was out before my contract ended, but that was clearly the writing on the wall. And so that was an experience, too. That you're like, you may think you're really good, but if that guy in the news director office doesn't think so, good luck finding the next job. As it was, I lucked out and fell into a job here in Connecticut, and that's gone pretty well.
So
how did the opportunity come up? Jinx.
Same.
So ESPN was really, I had an agent at the time named Greg Willinger, and I will forever, he no longer represents me, but I will forever be grateful because I had come out here to, he got ESPN to look at my tape, and I came out here to interview. And I try to alibi this. Everybody has an excuse, right, when they didn't do their best. So I will tell you mine. I came out the day after my grandmother had passed away. And my mom's like, your grandma, I mean, it's not quite like they wanted you to pitch in the World Series, but it's like your grandmother would tell you to go, and you know she would tell you to go. So I went. I was not terribly good. I was not really impressive. I was not at my best. Although the people were wonderful, but they hired a couple of people in front of me. In the interim, I had gone back home to Green Bay to interview for a job, and CNNSI, when that was a thing in Georgia. And I got offers from both of those places, CNNSI and Green Bay. And so my wife and I were we were skiing with a dear friend of mine, and we were in Colorado. And my agent says, okay, call me, and we're going to call whatever it was, Wednesday morning, and give me that decision. We'll get back. I said, okay, that's great. So I talked to my wife. We're over it and this, that. And I'm like, I'm going to have to call my mom and tell her I'm not coming home. Right? By the way, if you want your parents to think you don't like them, live in Green Bay, go to school in Missouri, then go to Oklahoma, then go to Arizona, right? Like when I called to tell her I had a new job, she pretty much thought it was going to be Acapulco. Like I was just not going to be here.
I have a similar trajectory. My parents have lived in the same house that I was born in Indiana, north of Indianapolis. As soon as I got out of Purdue, I went right to Chicago. I lived there for 8 years. And I told him I was moving to Phoenix, and you think I stabbed my mom in the heart when I told her that news that I had accepted a job out here.
It was always, where did we go wrong raising you? And I'm like, I don't know, independent. I'm not in your basement. I feel like I can go out of you feel fine, But no, they somehow they take offense to that. But we're in there, and so I called Greg and I told my wife, we decided you probably got to go to CNNSI because whatever that next job is, it's probably easier saying I've been at a major news network than in Green Bay, even at the sports director. So I called Greg and I said, all right, we've made the decision. And he interrupted me and said, you're going to ESPN. And I said, I am. And he had called them back. And he just said, hey, Anderson's about to sign with CNN and you're going to lose him and you will regret it. And he talked him into it. And so next thing you know, my wife and I are packing up the car and we are driving from Phoenix all the way out here, which was great. We had a little time. We drove everywhere. We stopped by and saw everybody. Things you couldn't do today because of the pandemic. But we, crisscrossed the country, and whether it was Oklahoma or Kansas City or Chicago, Michigan, we just all the way out till we got here, and have been here ever since.
I tell you, if somebody's made at least half of that drive, that part from the panhandle of Texas, oof, that gets boring.
Yeah. Yeah, the nice thing is, too, it's so flat, right? Like you think you can, you just see it's the old joke about Lubbock, right? If you stand in Lubbock on flat-footed, you can see for 10 miles. If you stand on a tuna can, you can see for 150. It is just that flat, right? So you're like, we'll just drive till we get to that gas station. You're like, I think the gas station is 800 miles away, but I can see it. So, yeah, it's a long drive, but it's good. It's good. America's a great country. Everybody should get out and drive around and see it.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your favorite or most memorable moment on SportsCenter?
On SportsCenter. That's really, there's two that really stand out prominently. One is terrific and one is a little more, what's the right word? Morbid. The first Super Bowl I did, which I'd been here about 2.5 years, 3 years, so it was a pretty quick rise. And it was when the Buccaneers and John Gruden beat the Raiders. We were out in San Diego. And after the very first one where I botched the pronunciation of Embarcadero Park, never rely on a teleprompter when the sun's in your eyes. I just turn it on, I'll just say Embarcadero. It's fine, we'll be okay. But I was standing there and I was sitting there and it's after the Super Bowl, and I'm sitting next to Dan Patrick. I am doing the SportsCenter after the Super Bowl with Dan Patrick. And I thought, I took a minute, looked around, and I said, I think I am, I think this is pretty, as close to I've made it moment as you can have. And then he stole one of my jokes, that bastard. And I learned you should never give away a good line in a commercial break. So that was good. And then the other one that really sticks out, which, like I said, was just because it was such a absurd night, is I'd gone to Missouri to do, I was on this board, I was there. And so I am flying back on Sunday morning. I am flying from Columbia and I'm driving from Columbia to St. Louis, and then I'm flying to Chicago, and then I'm home. And as I get to Chicago, I fly into Chicago. And the name escapes me. Fernandez, the Marlins pitcher, the young Marlins pitcher who dies in the boating accident. Jose Fernandez is killed. And so I'm calling my wife, so I'm in Chicago. I'm going to make good time, and I realize this guy's is going to dominate our story. I guarantee you, you've been around at that point. This was what? It was not 5 years ago. It was less than that. So I know we're going to have Pedro Gomez, which is great because I've known Pedro since I worked in Arizona, and he was with Diamondbacks as a beat reporter for the Republic. So I know I'm going to have him, and we're there. And at the time, Chris Berman and Tom Jackson were still doing the Blitz. So when they did that, that took up so much show that you really only needed one anchor. So now you're the only person there instead of two. So I go and I shoot the interview with Pedro. I get back and I start writing, and I'm done with that, and I'm hauling tail back to start typing. And as I'm walking back to type the rest, Les Miles gets fired at LSU. And I'm like, okay, well, so now I type a little more, and now I zoom back to the studio, and I've got to talk to Paul Feinbaum. And we do that. I'm done with Feinbaum, and I'm walking back again. The set's over here, newsroom's not close apart. It's a 5-minute walk. I'm walking back, and as I'm walking back, Arnold Palmer has died.
That's right. Wow.
So now I got to go back, and now we've changed this whole thing again. Scott Van Pelt, Lisa's going to come in, so I know I can be rescued there. There's going to be 8 minutes in this show where I'm going to at least get a breather that I can say something to Scott, and he'll be great. And because, he worked at the Golf Channel as a startup when Arnold had all the money in it. And so I'm like, okay, I'll be able to catch, in those moments, you're like, where am I going to catch a breath? Where am I going to be able to reset myself and go on to the next thing? But that was an extraordinary night to be a part of all that. And then on top of that, to sort of be alone. Because those are really, those are immense. And at one point, LSU, the story, here's Les Miles, and you're like, yeah, you're kind of third string on the story thing, right? But you don't want to screw up Arnold Palmer, and you don't want to shortchange this young man who had so much in front of him. So those were two big ones. Like I said, the Dan thing was extraordinary because you had this moment where you think, wow, professionally, I think I'm doing okay. And the other one was really a test of, are you any good at your job? And there's a lot of crap going on here, and most of it is all bad. But you don't want to come out and give a show where like, hi, welcome. I know you can't help but notice that I'm wearing a black hood and I've got a sickle with me tonight. Welcome to SportsCenter. You still have to make that palatable to people when it comes through. So those are extraordinary moments that will make the book that I will never or have no interest in writing.
That was a tough stretch. That was in 2016 because we had just lost, like 2 months earlier, lost Muhammad Ali. That was a really tough stretch for losing people.
Yeah, and I was a part of that. That was astonishing when we did when we did Muhammad Ali, because I was doing the 11, and the 11 had gotten over, and we were sort of all, to be a cynic, you're like, okay, looks like we avoided that tonight. We'll be able to. And Bob Lee had driven home, and then boom, it hit before we left. So everybody turned around and got suited up, and we went right back on air. And we were on air for, what was it, 4.5, 5 hours, commercial free. Where other people broke in, did 10 minutes to load. We were on the air for 5 hours between, I was on set, Bob Lee was on set, Scotty was on set. And then we're waking Teddy Atlas up with Joe Tessitore in the middle of the night, and there's Teddy throwing punches at 3 a.m, and just he's always fired up, and so that was extraordinary as well when that happened, and there's something about that. I was on set with John Wooden, passed away, not to go like, hey, who are your greatest hits of obits? But I learned in journalism school from a very wise man, right? Because most people get their name in the paper twice, when they're born and when they pass away. So don't screw either of those up, right? We're lucky in sports; you usually get a third time and a fourth time. He said that was his thing. Most people are going to get their name in the paper twice, and the first time, all you've done everything in life that you can be summed up in how much you weigh and how tall you are, 21 inches and 6 pounds, right? But by the time there's an obit, the only other time you're usually in the paper or on TV. And so it's like, get it right. So every time something like that happens, boy, I revert back to that, being 21 years old and sitting in that lecture class and learning that and thinking, yeah, that really is be right and be careful with those things because they're really, really important.
Oh yeah, that's wow. I've kind of stumped for words here, but I'm gonna go into a little bit more positive.
Yeah, less somber. You got anything else?
Let's bring it a little bit more fun. While I was prepping for this, I started digging into the This is SportsCenter commercial collection that has been running for 25 years, and they're just some phenomenal commercials. And I laughed out loud this morning because I stumbled upon the Abby Wambach commercial with you with the ankle injury.
Yeah.
You watched that today?
I might have been jaking that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's just like, how are you approached it? I mean, obviously this is just the theme of these commercials. That's what we've come to expect. But how are they, you're going to have a soccer legend walking down the hallway and you need to mock her sport. Like,
right. The entirety of her sport. Yeah. And it's funny because the two I've done that were main soccer ones, one didn't air very long because it got such a poor reception that people thought we were promoting or endorsing hooliganism. But it was a similar one where these hooligans had shown up at these soccer or whatever. We'll assume they're British. I don't know, but they were not kind gentlemen, right? Dave Revson, who was at the Big Ten Network, in it, right? And Dave was sitting at his desk, and they're standing, this group of them, and they're chanting at him, "The anchor is a wanker." And I'm walking down the same hallway with Abby that I do the Abby Wambach commercial, same hallway. And I say something to a guy and I say something wrong and he crashes me in the head with a beer bottle and down I go. And so they decided that maybe that was not in the spirit of Disney and ESPN at the time. And now I think now that we do UFC, we could probably crack people over the head with a beer bottle all the time. But at the time, that was one of them, And they're always fun. They're always fabulous. You always look kind of forward to it. It's great because all the athletes involved it's sort of their, like I said with Dan Patrick in the Super Bowl, it's sort of like now they've legitimized their career. Like that's the biggest thing they can do that doesn't involve commas and a paycheck. So most of them, with the exception, Chad Johnson's the only guy I did one with that wasn't really enthused about being there. He was like, when do I get out? When do I get out? All the rest of them are really wonderful, and you kind of see them as real people, and so it's always great to do that. And then it's funny how, like, they'll call and say, "Hey, we want you to do this one. It'll be great." Okay. And then they'll go, "You know what? Levy can't make his at 11 o'clock. Can you do one?" And and now all of a sudden, okay, and you're doing one that there's no rhyme or reason to them. Sometimes they pick them out. Like I do a lot of our tracks. So when Usain Bolt was there, I got to do Usain Bolt. But I think the Manning one got a lot of play. But I think when I did the Manning brothers one, which was fairly prominent, I'm not sure I was supposed to do that. I think they had written it for somebody else. And that person was either off that day and they didn't know it. And they're like, "Anderson, are you here?" "Yeah, okay." And now you're in. Those things slide once. Some of them they very specific they have, right? But for the most part, they can be sort of interchangeable. But they're always really fun, and the guys are always great and really accommodating. And then like the last one I did, the last one I did with Manny Machado. We were doing it, and then we were shooting it at a place where there was this guy who had all this Orioles stuff on his desk, right? Huge Orioles fan. And so I said, Machado, you should sign this guy's desk. So we picked up his desk calendar and just signed it, "Go Birds," giant and the thing, and then we covered it up. And so then one of the directors goes, "Hey, did you see Manny signed your desk?" And he's like, "I don't know." And now the guy's like, "How do I take my desk home from work when I ever leave this place?" Because Machado had done it. So most of them, right? They're really fun, and they're really it's such a less stressful environment, right? Usually they're either competing, or you're talking to them about competing, so they're kind of guarded, or they've just gotten done, so they're either elated and can't think straight, or they're really mad because they lost and can't think straight. So they're always kind of fun there to see them as sort of more natural people.
And the last one I have to mention, you mentioned the UFC, the George St. Pierre, where he's trying to coax you into his cage for sticky nose.
Can I tell you something really funny about that?
Oh, please do.
So George had a person with him, and in that, or I don't know if it was his personal person or within the production, he had a person assigned to him that just had to oil him up so he looked good and shiny. So we'd take a break, and they'd go, "We need to get George oiled up." Dude would come in, oil up George, another take. George got, yeah. Luckily, I was fully clothed, didn't need it, but yeah, we had an oil man for George, just to make sure he was sheened properly for the cameras.
So I laughed there for a second earlier when we talked about the Orioles because I kept hearing Oreos and I couldn't figure out about why I had so many cookies.
This is usually what happens with her. This is pretty.
These happen, yeah. Listen, that's fine. We can go. If you guys need some sort of a Nabisco sponsorship, we can keep going.
Yes.
We can. On occasion, they'll send us stuff, right? Like they have all these new flavors. They have test flavors of Oreos, and some of them, what was it? Like a cherry cola one was just awful. You know, there are certain things like I get that you need to expand your product line and your brand, but I'm like, how do you've made the Oreo? That's pretty darn good. I don't think we got to mess with that, right? I don't know. Just it seems all right. You know, listen, I wouldn't have screwed with Budweiser either, and it turns out Bud Light's not terrible.
I won't disagree with you there. And then like with Chips Ahoy, they put Sour Patch Kids in the Chips Ahoy. It doesn't work. It's just two completely independently great. Together, not so much. But, okay, well, you got the next question because I've been waiting for the question after that. So go for it.
So I had never seen Wipeout before yesterday. That's my honest.
I appreciate your honesty. Full disclosure is great. Hang on.
Talking about it.
He is left.
So here, I'm going to send you. Here's. This is the final episode.
Oh wow!
Right here. I can send it to you if you want. Got a lot of revisions and all those other things, but I have all of them, and then I just literally ran out of room in my closet. So the 7th and final season is sitting back here behind me under my TV. So anyway, if you need to review, let me know. I can tell you who won.
Okay.
I've probably seen.
But I have all 100 and some odd episodes. If you want, I'll mail them to you. Get you a DVD box set.
So how did you end up co-hosting Wipeout?
Yeah, that is how much time you got. The darndest story ever. I got what I thought was literally like a blind email, right? It might as well have been a Nigerian prince asking for money is how odd it looked. And it said they're doing the show, Wipeout, and it said here's how they're casting it. Literally, we want a sportscaster, we want a comedian, we would like a attractive sideline reporter, blah blah blah. And I look at that and I think that's kind of fun. That's neat. Okay, but that's not what I do at all. And no shot. And so I just put it aside. Luckily, it's not that I'm not email savvy, but it's more like I'm email indifferent. So it sat there for a while, wasn't even in my deleted items. And so now the guy calls me. And he said, one of the producers calls me. And he said, same guy who'd done Fear Factor. Wonderful man, Matt Kunitz. And I said, Matt, I don't think this is what I do. I don't think I'm who you're really looking for. It turns out they had reached out to a couple of us, Matt Weiner, I think Kenny Mayne, a couple. And then 2 days later, David Goldberg, who was the head of Endemol at the time, their non-scripted program, he calls me, he said, no, you're really the guy I want. Trust me on this. At least come out and read for the thing. So now at least I know it's legit, right? So it's just been between us. And I said, okay. And he had said to me, it was really funny. He said, listen, I said, I'm trying to be, I do sports, but I'm trying to be like, listen, I'm, journalist and down the road, my Missouri degree and rah. And he goes, dude, Howard Cosell did Battle of the Network Stars with Suzanne Summers. You think you can't do this? And so I thought, all right, yeah, and with a little luck, I'll see Adrienne Barbeau and things will be great. So now I have to call my agent who's not involved. And I said, hey, just so you know, I think I'm going to shoot a pilot for ABC. He's like, what the hell? You're doing what? I said, well, I think I got a pilot for ABC. And I tell him the same story I've just told you. And now he's like, I got to get on the phone with this guy. And so the producer finally says, can you send me a tape? And I said, Matt, I'd love to, and I don't mean this to sound condescending or flippant, but I said, I've worked here 10 years. I don't have a tape, but I was doing the overnights with Steve League. I said, I'm on every morning before, it was before he had morning SportsCenter. I said, I'm literally on every morning when you get up from 7 in the morning till noon. You can't miss me. And he said, oh, okay, great to know. So he watched, he calls me back 2 days later. He goes, hey, I watched and I think you're really good. I think you're really polished, but I'll be honest, I don't think you're that funny. And this is right in the middle of Michael Vick and dogfighting. And I said, well, while there is room for humor in the show, I said, the Michael Vick dog thing does not lead itself to what I feel to be great comedy, at least on air. And then I said, the line that I think got me the job, Kate, is I said to him, I said, but you got on here, in rereading the script, the roles, I said, you got on here a professional comedian. And I said, so if you've got a professional comedian, how funny do I have to be? Because I don't think there's anything less funny than a really funny guy and then somebody trying to keep up. And I think that's when, and so then I went out and shot the pilot, but I think that's when the guy said, okay, maybe this is the right guy because he's not going to be here to upstage the guy who we want to be funny as a whole. And I think that, literally, I think that line when I said, how funny do I have to be? And so we went out, we shot the pilot, and I shot the pilot with a comedian named Elon Gold. And then with Jill. So we get back, and Matt calls me, and he goes, we've got good news, and we've got some bad news. And I said, well, what do you got? Good news. We've been picked up by ABC. We're going to shoot 8 shows and a clip show. We're going to do 9 shows. We got a season. Here it is. We'll be in touch with your agent. And I'm like, thank God, I'm tired of doing this work. I'm going to get my 10% back. And then he said, and I said, so what's the bad news? He goes, well, we don't like Elon Gold. We're bringing in John Henson. I said, oh, great. I love, Talk Soup. This will be fantastic. Now I'm really geeked. I had not heard of Elon, but John I knew like crazy. So I hang up the phone. I'm always like, what's that? And I said, well, there's some irony here. They kept the guy who they didn't think was funny, and they fired the funny guy and brought in a new one. And then from there, we went on 7 years. And like I said, I've met great friendships. And on occasion, I was showing guys at work last night. I get a residual check for 89 cents that's coming in here in a week or two. But we had a ball shooting it. And ESPN was great. They're like, you can do it, but you have to do it on your time. So I'd work Sunday night till like 2:30 in the morning. I'd come home. I'd shower a car and pick me up. I'd get to the airport at 5:30 in the morning. I'd be on a 6:30 flight, bounce in Washington or Chicago somewhere, get to LA, start shooting about 2 hours after I landed. We'd shoot all day the next day, and then I'd take a red eye home so I could start my be back for ESPN again. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was terrific. So
I'm going to ask, before we started recording, you kind of hinted on this next one, but I have to ask with funny people, when the camera's rolling and the camera's not rolling,
right?
They may be the same, they may be not. When the camera is off, is John Henson, how is John Henson camera on versus camera off? Is it the same person?
Yes. Still the funniest man I know. And I think I know some funny people now, right? Just really, really funny, really quick-witted. The thing I learned there, and we did, it was unscripted. We had people that called comedy producers. So there would be people that would help write some of the things. And I found very quickly that I know a lot of people who think they're who are funny. I shouldn't say that think they're funny. I think on occasion I'm funny. But there's a difference between a guy slipping on a banana peel and somebody making a joke. And somebody who's really funny, or is a comedian who does it for a trade, that go, hey, here's your cup. I need 10 jokes about that in 30 minutes. And they can write a joke about a cup or what's in the cup or somebody, and that's where people like John are really gifted. It's like I said, anybody, if the Roadrunner falls off the cliff or the Wile E. Coyote falls off the cliff chasing the Roadrunner, somebody can make a funny joke about that. But if you're just sitting there with Acme roller skates, who's funny? John is really funny. And he really had a hard job because he's powerfully funny. So there'd be a joke in there. And he goes, we can do that better. And he would. And it'd be really funny. And then the person from Standards and Practices, AKA the censor, would go, "That is really funny. You can't say it on TV." So now he's got to go back and he's got to sell a joke that he knows isn't as funny as the joke he wants to tell. Or then there'd be some producer would go, "Well, let's try this." So now he's trying to sell a joke that might be the third funniest joke, and he's still got to sell it. And because he's the funny guy, when people watch it, if that joke falls flat, they're like, "That guy's not funny at all." And you're like, "No, he's really funny." Excuse me. He just got a bad spot, right? I had it really easy. If I said something funny, great, chalk one up, but that's not expected. And if I said something stupid, they're like, "Okay, well, he's not a comedian." John doesn't have that luxury, right? Like, you have to be really funny. And if you're not, then they're like, "You're a dope." So we're great that ran at 8 o'clock on ABC. But if that had been pay-per-view at midnight, it might have been even funnier.
They show I mentioned they show the reruns on the weekends after the 10 o'clock news on our ABC affiliate here in Phoenix. And there's some things where I'm just like, wow, I can't believe they got that past the censors still. Like a couple of weeks ago, they showed the episode where you have the NFL theme. You have the NFL players appear. And at the very end of the episode, John disappears off of camera as you're trying to wrap the show up. He takes the water cooler and dumps it on Joe Wagner's head, like, woo, the big celebration, and you get to, you get to say his "good night and big balls" line, and then John finds out you said it already, and he gets like really upset, and he's turned around and he's like, "Jill, tell John I have big balls."
I will say this: as the show got more popular, we started with 9, and the next year we did like 16. And then by the third year, it was the number one, not just in its time slot, but like a couple of weeks, it was like the number one show. So then we did like winter Wipeout and spring Wipeout, and we're like, oh my goodness, we kind of ran into the ground. But as we became more successful, they sort of allowed us a little more leeway. We kind of we were able to elbow out a little more room. As the ratings increased, some of that melted away, and we were able to, I don't want to say get away with more, but we were able to expand what was acceptable joke material. So, he's terrific. Jill Wagner is phenomenal, and a new mom. I don't know if you know that.
Yes,
Jill recently had a baby, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
So Army, your daughter's Army, your dad was in the military. So, and she just couldn't be nicer. In a pinch, God bless her, because her dad, she could be more foul-mouthed than John, which is just, I'm not sure it's admirable, but it's kind of funny, to see her say that. So, just really, really fortunate to work with those people, and really fortunate that the thing took, Jill, who has been an actress and reads for parts but doesn't get them all the time, or John, who tries to develop these things and does it. Matt Kunis, Endemol, who did the program, right? Fear Factor was great, but they tried different things. They had how to escape a game show where it went for a season. Those people are really in Hollywood. I was an interloper, and I used to joke, I'm like, I don't know what you guys bitch about with the TV all the time. I mean, I came in, we shot a pilot, we got a hit show, and it ran for 7 years, and then we're done. Like, I'm 1 for 1. I don't know why everybody finds this such a hard deal. I don't know why are you people having to wait tables in the interim? This is easiest thing. This is not even shooting fish in a barrel. This is just, there's no barrel. I'm just picking up fish right now. How hard can this be? And then they all tell me to go to hell.
So I asked my boyfriend if I could ever compete if it came back, and his answer is hell no, because I get hurt all the time. I could get hurt walking out of the room. So I'll
ask you this. Are you seriously hurt?
Yes.
She wears a wrist brace every 6 months, literally. I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. Because
John Henson always used to say, when people would go, did anybody ever get seriously hurt? And he'll go, well, why don't you define serious? Right? And we had one where we're like, you guys think we're hurting people. We're actually saving lives. And we had a guy that went on the show. And like everybody else, right? We just beat the living snot out of the guy. And so a month or two later, he is still really hurting and really having some problems. And so he goes to the doctor because I think he's thinking, okay, maybe there's a lawsuit to be had, right? We always joked. We didn't know if the rider was this thick, that people had to sign away, or if it was this thick, like just don't even try. But anyway, so this guy who looked like, turns out had a brain tumor.
Oh, wow.
Operated on, removed, lived, goes on, life is great. And so now John's like, we're saving lives with people, hurting them. Are you kidding? People should come here for a physical to make sure they're okay. Hey, you would do great. You would do wonderful on the show, right? Because there were 24 people. They tried 8 people that were sort of everyday people, 8 people who looked like maybe they're athletic and could do it. And then they found 8 whack jobs that would give the show some personality. But you found out all these guys that were these strapping Adonises, and I'm going to go do this. They'd go, and the first time they wiped out or did something stupid, they realized they were overcome with embarrassment, right? Their whole ego just shut them down, and they still had to look cool, and they'd jake it, right? You'd get some housewife, and she's like, listen, I got 4 kids. I made 3 lunches. I'm used to having peanut butter on my shirt, and every once in a while a kid throws up on me. You think falling over is a big deal? No. And they'd go through it, and they were much more fun to watch, gave much better effort than some of these guys who you'd think, oh, look at that guy. He's going to go right from here to, the NFL. And he was in the first minute and a half, you go, this guy's a clown, And then the other 8, the 8 people were just thought, okay, I'm going to be on this show. I will be discovered in my 2.5-minute run on the big balls, and I will probably replace Ellen or Kelly Clarkson or Oprah and have my own talk show.
They've got their 15 seconds at the starting spot to say their ridiculous line. It seemed like it became more ridiculous as time went on.
Right. And next stop, Studio City. I'm pretty sure I'll have a talk show. It'll be great. I'll be the guy replacing Leno, replacing Carson.
Well, I mean, speaking of the show, I did read recently that apparently TBS, whenever things settle down from the pandemic, is planning on bringing the show back. I'm going to ask, any chance of getting the gang back together for a reunion?
There is no shot, from what I understand. The guy, Matt Kunis, the guy who hired me and runs the show, called one day. He said, John, I need you to call. Are you around? And I thought, oh, sure, great. Yeah. I thought it was something totally unrelated, right? I had no idea. Maybe his wife, who runs a wonderful diaper drive in Los Angeles, anything. And he goes, this might show you that it looks like they're going to redo the show, and don't feel bad. None of the original cast is coming. They don't want to do this. He goes, they even tried to get rid of me, but they don't realize it's my show and I'm attached to so if they're going to do the show, they get me, whatever part of it was. And that's fine. I am not offended in the least. I have a great job that I work still 5 days a week through all of this, which has been lucky. I got one son that I just sent off to college. I've got a daughter as a junior. I don't need to fly to LA. I don't need to do that. It was wonderful. People always go, you gonna do something else? I'm like, no, that's not. That was such a one-off, lucky thing in a lifetime. Like I had no desire to go host The Price is Right, or any of these other things like that. I talked to Joe Tess, who does Holy Moly now, right? Like, Joe, you swiped our show. But good for them. He and Rob Riggle. I don't need to jump back into it. It was great. And it's like anything else, right? I'm not sure. Do you want to risk go back? And what if it goes, wow, this is old, it's trite, it's not the same. I don't want to be on the back end of that. So I'm totally fine. And I hope it goes well because, like I said, because Matt is still associated with that, then I hope there's great success there for him because he deserves it. And what he did for me and was able to do is I sent my son to college, and I got to he won't have any student loans because I was on Wipeout and we paid for college. So, bully on them if they do well. Yeah. Now I got a lot of friends and the same crew that work on Cannonball, and I hate those people. He said tongue in cheek.
So we got one more, and then we're going to hand it over to Kate for her, the questions I have not pre-screened. All
right. Am I going to have to look up dinosaurs?
No.
Okay, good. Especially because I used the Levy joke and I'm out.
So last question before we get into that. How's the pandemic changed how you prep for SportsCenter and reporting? We had months of no live sports other than having to show reruns of cornhole tournaments. It was pretty barren. Like what was that like, knowing that you don't have the baseball, you don't have the NBA playoffs, you got nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's still peculiar in when you go through that, and there were times we're doing one show a night. You'd work for a couple, 3 days, safety wise, we do a couple, 3 days, then literally leave for 2 weeks, come back. We had certain teams, right? Kenny and I would go 3 days. Butchie and Eves would go 3 days. Van Pelt would go 3 days, and sometimes maybe an extra one in there. And then Zubin and Steve Levy. Zubin, who's now doing a great job on the morning show there for ESPN Radio. So, first off, it was like, what am I doing with this time off, right? And you feel horrible, like, wait, because we didn't furlough anybody. And I got asked to take a bit of a pay cut, but that wasn't, they didn't cut my hamstring. So that was remarkable. And then there were times, I tell you, you almost felt bad because so much of what you did was speculation of when will sports come back, when really you had no idea, right? Because this pandemic, this disease, the virus has been so unpredictable. We didn't know anything in March. I was on set that night when Rudy Gobert was announced positive in Oklahoma City, and the whole thing blew up. And then literally I was supposed to go on vacation the next day, so I wasn't in. But that changed a lot, so I was on that last show. And so there was all that, and you're like, okay, here we are. We're going to go, this is what it could look like. It could look like a bubble. It could look like this. It could look like – and that got hard because you're like, are we doing this because we really know? Are we doing this because we're speculating? Because you and I, Kate, DJ, we could all go, well, it's going to have to be this. It's going to have to be that. Suddenly the NCAA tournament's gone. So for the first month, it was all just doom and gloom. When is it coming back? We're canceling this. We're canceling that. There's no U.S. Open. The British Open's gone for good. We're going to try to move the Masters, right? It was just every day. You're just like, this is just powerfully just gutting everything we know. So that part was just hard in delivering the news, right? And I get it. That's another great lesson I learned in journalism. You don't get to choose the news, right? You got to report it, even if you got to report it 50 straight days. And so that was really, that part was really hard, that uncertainty. And then just when it comes back now, it's not even easy because, how many people have their heart in it and they're trying, and then guys opt out and they're worried about their safety and, or I just had a son or a daughter, or I've got a kid, pre-existing. And so it's still maddening to figure it out. It's still there. I still think what's amazing is that it has shown that, every time there's I find every time there seems to be some crisis, we try to minimize sports. Well, now that put in perspective, we see how insignificant sports is. And the longer it goes, just the opposite turns out to be true of how much we need sports, how much people need that for whether it is their outlet for fandom, whether it is their relaxation, whether it is their, their way to get away. But it seems to be where we start, minimize. I've always said this, if you need some tragedy to give you perspective on sports, then probably you're not the right sports fan to begin with. You probably don't have it categorized as it should be. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't take a tragic loss of a Marlins pitcher to bring, boy, this brings me into perspective. But as it goes on, you're like, wow, this is really part of our culture. This is really something, right? And everybody has something. My dad, I always talk about sports like my dad was a gardener. And so that was after he got done pouring basements and holes all day, he went to his garden, and that's where he relaxed and decompressed. And so, yes, it was his getaway, and yes, it was his place where he went to relax, and yet he was worried about the weather every day. Is it going to rain enough for my tomatoes, or is it not going to rain enough, right? So it was still totally serious to him, right? It was like a passion to that. So while it was this relaxing, had nothing to do with his health, welfare, taking care of his family. It had everything to do with his well-being, everything to do with how he was able to literally do the rest of his life and live. And I think that's with sports sometimes, right? Is it that important? Does the final score really matter? No. Does the fact that I like the Packers and if they get the Lombardi Trophy, does it really change my life? No. But you know what? On Sunday, that's what I do, and that bonds our family. And Thanksgiving a few years ago, we're like, Brett Favre's retired. Everybody came home. We're going to the game. So there's something, fundamentally I find really important about it that everybody has. And so I try not to minimize it. I don't make it more than it is, but I don't ever want to go, oh, well, it's just sports. Because I think we've proven, and I could go show you 15 buildings on my campus that tell you it's maybe just not, I defy you to look at, if you look over your right shoulder and see that W, right? Tell me anybody after the Cubs won that World Series thought sports was just, it's all right. Like, it's not. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the physiology of it is that makes it so with us, but it's important. And it's okay to admit that, right? Like, I don't think there's any shame in that. I think you can tell people that sports is really important, and it doesn't devalue real issues that affect you every day, whether it's the economy, whether it's how you feel about the upcoming presidential race, whether it's how you feel about, making ends, whatever it is that would be considered significant. I don't think it minimizes that I, on occasion on Saturdays want to paint my face, or I get completely irrational because in Missouri's case, some referee can't count to 4 and is going to give Colorado a 5th down, or we're going to lose. And luckily that was almost, 30 years ago, and it barely even bothers me anymore at all, ever.
I can tell completely.
And Purdue had that exit in the Elite Eight against Virginia where it's like, they had the lead with, 12 seconds to go, and Virginia tied it at the buzzer, and it's just like, that's going to take a while to lead.
Yeah, listen, last time I saw those jokers, they came into Columbia and threw the ball around the lot like it was a damn 7-on-7 game.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Coach Brom drew up some ball plays, and they just threw that thing around like it was nothing. Was that Blau that day or whatever? Who's the guy the Lions just ran off?
Yeah, David Blau. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw they just let him go, and I thought, that's the same guy that – so I watch him, right? He gets this emergency start against the Packers, and I'm like, I am living this all over again. Here this guy comes out, and you're like, I get it. Purdue, you got quarterbacks. But you're not Jim Everett. You're not Drew Brees. You're not Bob Greasy, and we make the guy look like he's Montana. Luckily, the Packers salvaged that. But, I've seen enough of that guy. David
Blau is also the one who was, led the curb stomping of Ohio State a few years ago.
Yep.
Still, I mean,
which, by the way, between that and the young man, is still one of the feel-good stories of the year, and this year, last year, 2 years ago, and every year.
I got my my Tyler Trent bobblehead.
There he is. God bless Tyler. Yep.
And I want to say too, I was going to say this afterwards, but since it got brought up, Scott Van Pelt had a tribute to him after he passed away, which is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen on television, and I doubt he's probably going to see this, but thank you. That was amazing.
Tell you what, here's Scott Van Pelt's greatest gift: is there aren't a bunch of guys that can burn the candle at both ends. As often as that guy can make you cry with humor because he's doing bad beats or Lou Holtz imitations, whatever, as funny as he can be has equal depth going the other way with caring and compassion and putting words to real emotion without sounding trite, without sounding, just, oh, here, this is flowery, but there's no bad, there's not a lot of people that can burn both those ends and do it so well. And that's where Scotty is uniquely gifted. That, and he's 6'7", which is ridiculous.
Really? I would never guess that.
Yeah, and now he doesn't have any hair. He used to have hair, and he would in the glasses. He wore those, and I had these that I just wore never on TV. And then he wore them, and I thought, wow, those look great. So I literally stole the idea, right? I'm like, I'm going to wear those too. Those look great. And then Joe Madden will wear them, and it'll really catch on. But the first time we'd done the show, he'd been here. I don't know, not very long. Still had hair, and my mom calls the next day. She said, "Who's the new guy on TV?" And I said, "Scott Van Pelt. He came over from the Golf Channel." She said, "Well, I have one other question." I said, "What's that?" She goes, "Which one are you?" And so now we always joke that I have hair and he has a pocket square. So now we're easier to tell apart when he comes through. But I'm glad he has his own show, because it got to be where they wouldn't let us anchor together anymore, because we kind of would get sideways and I always like to say that the bottom line is the final score is always sort of the most important thing. And every once in a while, we might even have forgot the final score was involved. And so sometimes it's better than, you know how it is. Sometimes the teacher separates you, and it's for the better for both of you.
I remember when he did his radio show for a while, and I listened to, like, you know, his first handful of episodes. I lost track of how many times where it's like he had to catch himself from swearing on live radio, and
yeah,
eventually got that.
Yeah. But yeah, he's funny, and I'm fortunate to be with, really, whether it's Henson funny, but Scotty's just so entertaining, and John Buccigross is that way, and Kenny Mayne. I have to read Kenny Mayne's things before he says them, otherwise I will laugh out loud on air. Some people get Kenny, some people don't. I get it. That's fine. There's to taste. But I literally, I love him, so I have to kind of dip in to see what he might say, so that, you know, after the Brewers lost the sausage race and Randall Simon got hit, and then PETA wanted to have they wanted a vegan sausage in there, and then he writes something about, like, then I guess slaughtering veal in the outfield is really going to be a no-no, and it's just like, what are we doing? So yeah, so there are times that I've just got to prepare myself, and then still maybe turn away on top of that.
And I remember after that, they had the T-shirts that they were selling outside of Miller Park that said, like, yeah, the Brewers, you can't whack our sausage.
It's awful, right? And I have a collection of the sausages. I had all 4. And then a little kid who was in a hospital in Nebraska said, how come was it like the hot dog never wins? And so I found him the stats, and I sent him my hot dog plush guy, and I sent it to him. And then Tony Gwynn, we were on set with, God rest his soul, what a wonderful man Tony was. When the Brewers drafted his son, I gave him another one of my sausages as a Father of the Year award on air. I said, here, you need to take this. And then, so I still have the bratwurst, and I want to say the Polish, but whatever one that Randall Simon clubbed, he's got a Band-Aid on his knee still. And I just put on, even though it just sits on my desk next to a Cecil Cooper doll, bobblehead. I wanted to make sure he was okay. So I put him, you know.
Then, you know, and
patched him up.
So he was with the Pirates then, and then the Cubs picked him up.
Yeah.
And he was on the 03, and I just remember, you know, the Cubs signed him very late, like right at the deadline, and like the non-waiver deadline, and people like, who? Like, the guy who hit the sausage in Mill. Oh, that guy, yeah.
That guy, yeah. Big fella.
So, Kate,
what do we got?
What do you have today?
Okay. First question. I'm starting easy, okay?
Okay.
Are you a cat person, a dog person, or a different animal person?
I'm a cat person. My grandmother told me, John, don't ever trust anybody who doesn't like cats. I had a cat in college. I used to have 2 cats. When I got out of college, I had a cat when I was in Phoenix that I had to sadly put down. She got old. By the way, vets have no sense of humor. She had a liver disease. And I told him, I said, I tried to get the cat to stop drinking, and it wouldn't go to the meetings. But I felt horrible, so they said, we're going to have to put the cat down. Would you like to come see it? And I said, yes, I want to say goodbye. Dumbest thing I ever did. Now, because I'm sitting there petting the cat. I love the cat. The cat's name was Miss Amelia Penelope Fluffingston. And I'm like, you have no idea what I've just done, right? So I'm like, next time that ever happens, and now my wife is allergic, my son is, so I don't get to have animals. But I love cats. Leave it at that. I love cats. Movie, so-so, but the actual animal.
And DJ, that is a normal type of cat name. Mine's Fluffy Rambo the Fluffinator.
Yeah, so we just called her Amelia, but yeah, Miss Amelia Penelope Fluffingston, because I adopted her, and so I didn't want her to feel bad like she didn't have some sort of pedigree, so I gave her one.
Yeah, mine was we named a male cat Fluffy, and we didn't want to make him feel
right. You don't want to emasculate the cat. You probably already had it spayed, neutered, and took out its front claws. That thing's had a hard life.
Okay, question 2. What do you do to make your omelet? Like, what ingredients do you put in it?
Nothing that would be considered a vegetable. After that, I don't care. If you want to put some sort of, I feel like I'm Ron Swanson. If you want to put some sort of meat in it and cheese and salsa, salsa, I guess technically counts, but I don't need spinach. I don't need, fennel. I don't need onion or green pepper. A Denver omelet, forget it. By the way, why did Denver invent the omelet? But none of that. I need meat, I need cheese, and I'm not going to apologize. I'll put a little ketchup on the side and dip it in there.
Okay. What song would you sing in your American Idol audition?
American Pie. But I don't want it. But I'm going to tell Ryan Seacrest, I'm singing all 7.5 minutes. Don't take 45 seconds. None. And in about 1988, when was Oklahoma? Oklahoma was number 1 in the country. They were at a regional. They were in Nashville, and they barely won the first round against Middle Tennessee State. And then the next day, 2 days later, they beat the snot out of Louisiana Tech. And in the interim there, I went to a little bar in Nashville, and I sang a version of American Pie. I had my bowling shoes on because I'm from Wisconsin. And this dive bar, that honest to God, the fact I was not discovered that night in Nashville still is a bit of a mystery to me. Yeah. But don't give me just, here's one chorus. I need to have the whole stinking thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, what emoji describes your life?
I'm not really good. I'm not excellent with the emojis at all. So I'll do the little guy with the Z's, the sleep one, because I'm either trying to get more of it or not enough of it. So, I'm sort of always perpetually like, I really would like to be that guy. Either I am asleep or I would like to be. So that's probably it. Otherwise, I don't have a great emoji meme, game. I'm so socially, I'm sort of against Twitter. I don't know if you've seen people in our position, but a lot of times it never seems to work for them. It's generally more against them. It's the old thing like getting your name in the paper, right? People do that all the time. John, can you put me on TV? I'm like, do you realize what a service I could do in your life by keeping you off TV? That's far more valuable. Or keeping your name out of the paper. So I feel that way about Twitter. Like, Butchie is phenomenal on it, and Schefter, but most time that's just a potential trouble. And so I kind of stay away from that. And so, yeah, I'll go with the sleepy emoji, but I'll be honest, that's a really soft answer because I have no conviction in that whatsoever.
Okay.
I have more conviction in my spirit dinosaur than I do in my emoji.
Well, I hope you have conviction in the next answer. Or your next answer. What makes a good Wisconsin fish fry?
Perch, rye bread, coleslaw, and no utensils. The fish fry, a perch fish, and preferably it should be at a tavern that only has, the only time they serve food the whole week is on Friday for the fish fry. That should be the only time. Otherwise, I'll be honest, it's a little too swanky. I'm not a fish boil guy. That's a whole different thing. The fish fry, you got to have perch. I'd like a double order. And then, rye bread, and then I want coleslaw. And if you want to just put it on a paper plate, I will eat it like a caveman, and I'm not going to apologize.
I didn't even know that was a thing, but I didn't disclose. Kate actually.
You didn't know what was a thing.
I didn't know a Wisconsin fish fry was a thing. Kate lived. I didn't disclose this, but Kate lived in Milwaukee for 4 years. She went to school there. So.
Did you live in Chicago? Like, it's only how far to the border, dude?
Okay, it's like 90 minutes to Milwaukee, if that.
We wanted to go to Wisconsin, and then my folks were like, "Ooh, great America! Let's go ride a roller coaster." Never got there. Come on, man, you're better than that.
I know the Mars Cheese Castle. I know that.
Beer, gas, diesel, cheese. When I was home recently, we were during the pandemic. I'm like, I had an extra week, and I said, you know what? My mom is 78 at home. She's in great health, wonderful, but I thought I'm going to go see her. So I drove from Connecticut to South Bend, and then went home. And as I drove by, please don't turn me into the cops, I took a shot for my daughter of the Mars Cheese Castle because she loves the Mars, even though they've taken the big mouse off the top of it, which is a shame. But still, how do you know the Mars Cheese Castle but not a fish fry?
I mean, I've been to Milwaukee a few times.
That's backwards, It's like,
I know some of the things, like, there's the Mars Cheese Castle, there's the Bong recreational area. I mean, I know some of the bigger
I
attractions.
still somewhere have a shirt that says beer, gas, diesel, cheese, because that's what all the fillings, all the gas stations say when you come in: beer, gas, diesel, cheese. What else do you need? Like, if that can't get you, those are practically the 4 food groups: beer, gas, diesel, and cheese.
I'll also have to say I'm a big fan of Usinger sausage. That's big fan.
Yep. Now, see, I'm all right, but I probably would be more of a Johnsonville man.
What about Kringle?
I am not. I mean, I don't mind a good pastry and a good donut, but I'm not really just the mere size of it seems like, is this for one? Is this made for sharing? Yeah. So I'm not a big. The Kringle is nice. I had a very nice fan from Wisconsin send me a couple, not more than 3 or 4 months ago. Here's 2 raspberry Kringles. I'm like, they've been sent through the mail. I guess it was pre-pandemic. That's how this has screwed it up. So it was before that. But it's since the turn of the year, I'm like, and God bless you. That's nice Wisconsin people are, right? It's just, I always say that about the Packers. They run around town. It's not that we're like Packer worshipers. If we see you at the grocery store, we just want to make sure you're eating right. That's all. And like, this person, God bless her, she sent me sent me 2. Sent me a Kringle. And like, how about just some Leinenkugel red,
Okay, I think you got one more, don't you?
No, that was 5.
Oh,
that was 5.
All right. You made
Excellent.
it through, and I didn't have to do one of these today, which usually.
No, but you're better for it, because now you know that you should go find a tavern. I would go to Green Bay, go to Merrick's Friday, get the fish.
There you go. So
and when you sell it, I'll have the fish. They're going to go like, yeah, what else? What else is? There's nothing else to order.
Yeah. Sit down.
Like,
Here you go.
Can't have the prime rib. That's not an option.
Oh man, so this has been absolutely wonderful. Really appreciate you taking time.
I feel like I've taken up way too much of your time. I talk too much,
absolutely.
but I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for I appreciate the indulgence.
And I mean, you've made it clear. I don't think you're on social media at all that I can see.
I am not. I'm not. And like I said, I really do. I have some theories. I've seen too many people burned by it.
Mm-hmm.
I have no desire to tweet something and then have people just, because there's nothing good. It doesn't matter what it is, right? You could put 2 and 2 is 4 and somebody will say, well, that's the new math. I have no desire to let trolls into my back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think my life is so interesting that I went, hey, I'm reading the latest Dan Jenkins book. Well, he's passed away, but I'm reading the latest, whatever it is, golf novel and having a peanut butter bagel. Like, I don't think that interests people. I'm proud of my kids, but I don't need to brag about them on stuff like that. And then the other thing is, I see people that are really clever sometimes, and I think, you know what? I'm on at 11. I need to keep the clever. I don't have so many clever things that I should be giving them away for free at noon when I might need it on TV at 11. So I just, it's Neil Everett and I are holding out. They keep asking us, would you like to be on Twitter? Or they'll go, you can build your brand. It's a chance to build your brand. I'm like, you know what? My brand is ESPN. That's fine. ESPN is my brand, and I will ever be, those 4 letters after my name will far do more for me ever and have than me tweeting out, crazy. So as much as I would love to go, hey, let me publicize that we're doing this, I do not have any of those. I don't have Instagram. I'm like picture me as like maybe 3 inches ahead of Bill Belichick with snap face or whatever he always says. So,
I mean, Kate's I'm just teeing her up right now, but I mean, Facebook and Twitter, those all came out while I was in college. I signed up. We didn't know what we were doing back then. Right. I look back on some of that stuff and I cleaned it up. I mean, it wasn't anything horrible, but it's like, man, if I saw that and I didn't know that, I would think that guy's a total jerk.
Yeah, and it doesn't go away. Like it's like people are laying. I feel like people are laying in wait. Like it happens at the NFL draft. Suddenly the kids draft and are like, "Did you see what he wrote at 14? Oh my God, he was 14. He doesn't know. Nobody knows anything. Hell, at 25, I was still a moron. So I told my daughter in Chicago, I'm like, just every guy until he's 25 is just kind of dumb. We are. It takes us longer to get it than most of the average. It's okay. You know, we're not mean, we're not bad people, we're not rude. It takes us a while to sort of figure out how to be decent to people, you know?
EJ, maybe next year you'll figure it out.
Okay.
There you go. Come closing in. So
Something works.
anyway, I will sign off. I'm gonna go have dinner. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Yep, John Anderson. Watch him on SportsCenter. So check us out at StadiumScene.tv, at Stadium Scene on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, at Stadium_Scene on Instagram, and we'll see you next time.